Good morning. Happy Monday, everybody. Welcome into Pickswise on Pickswise.com and our Pickswise YouTube channel where you need to make sure you subscribe. I'm Mark Zinno. He's Jared Smith. We got a big Monday show for you. We are presented by Superbook Sports. As I said, make sure you subscribe to that Pickswise YouTube channel. Download the Pickswise app. It's available on the Apple Store and Google Play as well. We'll have big winners and losers from Week 18 in the NFL. Of course, we'll preview the College Football National Championship game tonight between Georgia and TCU. We'll get some props in here with Bobby Stanley, a.k.a. Prop Holliday. We'll take a look ahead at the NFL playoff matchups in Super Wildcard Weekend. And, of course, we'll have our plays of the day. Jared, good morning. Welcome in. Happy Monday to you.
Good morning. NFL regular season in the books. It flies by every year. And I'm sure the playoffs will provide plenty of fireworks as well.
Yeah, going to be some interesting matchups here. Of course, last night we get the matchup that decided the final playoff spot as the Green Bay Packers lose to the Detroit Lions, allowing the Seattle Seahawks to back in to the NFL playoffs. But we'll get back to the NFL here. Let's start with the NFL, I should say, winners and losers as we do Week 18 before we get to College Football Playoff National Championship. Your biggest winner for the weekend was who, Jared?
Well, I kind of went in a different direction. I kind of winners and losers of the regular season. And I kind of went in a direction, we're not going to be talking about these teams too much longer, so I'll say my farewell to the Detroit Lions because they were one of the best teams this year against the spread. They had absolutely nothing to play for last night, and I think they played one of their best games of the year. On the road against their divisional rival, a team that they had already beaten this year, and you know how hard it is to beat a team twice during the regular season, and they went into Lambeau, and they played great. The defense played great. Turnovers, stops, figured out ways to, scheme out that run game and make Green Bay's very good run game look very bad last night. And just overall, I really was impressed with everything we've seen from the Lions this year. I think the future is very bright I don't want to say Jared Goff, but I think he will be at least given a chance to be the starter next year. The improvements that he made with Ben Johnson throughout the course of the year, I think were very noteworthy. And again, they were one of the best teams. If you bet on the Lions every week this year, you had a very, very good season. So I tip of the cap to Dan Campbell and his team because I think it was a big winning season for them. Even though they didn't make the playoffs, they finished above 500. They finished tied for that final wild card spot. They didn't quite get the tiebreaker, but certainly if you take the full big picture, I think it was a winning year for the Lions.
No, I would agree. Again, hats off to Dan Campbell. Biting kneecaps and all, they finished off their season in a really good way. I sort of took a little bit of a macro view with my winner, that being the San Francisco 49ers. Brock Purdy comes in, and they do not look like they have lost a beat at all. Again, and people will ask, well, can Brock Purdy win a Super Bowl? I think that's not the way to phrase the question. Can the Niners win a Super Bowl with Brock Purdy? That answer is yes. I don't think Brock Purdy can win a Super Bowl on any other team other than the San Francisco 49ers because of their coach, because of their defense, because of their run game. All those things make Brock Purdy's job really easy. But there's not a lot of doubt surrounding the 49ers right now. Despite what the Eagles have accomplished this year, there are many people, myself included, who think the 49ers are the best team in the NFC. So they are my winner for not only this week, but for a latter part of the second half of this season. Your biggest loser, though, Jared, goes to who?
I would say the Tennessee Titans. And I was doing this. Someone pointed this out to me the other night after they lost. But so they went into Green Bay, they beat the Packers, and then their offensive coordinator, Todd Downing, got a DUI after the game. And that was it. They didn't win another game from that point on. All they would have needed to do is win one of their games down the stretch, and they would have managed to win that division, but they could not do it. And I think, not saying it's all on Todd's shoulders for getting a DUI and then kind of being removed from the team for a while and having the offense go into a tailspin. Obviously, injuries, Tannehill getting hurt. You saw a lot of defensive injuries as well. But yeah, I think overall this is a Titans team that certainly was the best team in their division this year until all of those things happened. And then the Jaguars just kind of on the final leg of the race there, the Jaguars are able to put their nose in front in the finish line. And that game was wild. I didn't watch most of it. I was on a plane home, so I didn't see a lot of the first half, but the second half certainly was tight, and anyone could have won it. And Jags made a play in the final drive there, and figured out a way to find the end zone, and that's why they're in the playoffs. We'll see what happens this weekend with Jacksonville, but I think Tennessee, based off of who was their coach, their defense, their quarterback, their running back, the talent on that team, I think it's pretty disappointing that they finished the season with 7 straight losses and 10 losses overall, and are on the outside of a playoff picture that they probably should have been in on.
Yeah, again, I think the injuries, for me at least, with that particular team played the biggest part in it. But things that went wrong, I would have never. After they had lost 3 in a row, I was like surprised that just because Vrabel was their coach, I was shocked to see them lose at the rate that they lost. My biggest loser, for me, honestly, is the Dallas Cowboys. Not only for the absolutely embarrassing performance they put on the field yesterday, and a constant reminder that Mike McCarthy is the absolute worst prep coach in the NFL, maybe outside of Cliff Kingsbury. He is the absolute worst preparation coach in the league right now. But if you look down, after they whooped up on the Colts, they almost lost to the Texans. They lost an overtime game to the Jaguars. They beat Gardner Minshew and the Eagles. They beat a banged-up Titans team that you're talking about. And then they lose to the Commanders, who started a rookie in Sam Howell. There was nothing impressive about the last 5 weeks of this Cowboys season. Nothing. And they're going to go into the playoffs right now, and they're going to go into Tampa Bay and go in to face Tom Brady and a Tampa offense that, at least for the game that they needed to win the most against Carolina, looked like the Tampa Bay offense we saw that went to a Super Bowl and back to the NFC Championship game, or the divisional playoff, rather, the year before. So I don't know. I don't have a lot of faith in the Cowboys right now. They are not playing the best brand of football going in. And, oh, by the way, that vaunted defense, down the stretch, Jared, gave up 23 to the Texans, 40 to the Jaguars, 34 to the Eagles, and again, 13 to the Titans with a guy who had about 24 hours of prep work going in, and then 26 to the Commanders. So one of that was a pick six, and we'll call it 20. You get my point, though. Certainly not playing well. That is my biggest loser of week 17, the latter part of week 18, rather, in the latter part of the season. Overreaction, though, Jerry. You got a biggest overreaction?
Well, I'll take it in a different direction, just because I'm in one of those moods this morning with the final day of the regular season. It's hard to process the entire season in just the span of a few hours. But I'll give you the biggest. How about the biggest overachiever? And that's the Minnesota Vikings. I don't know how they won 13 games. I mean, that has to be one of the most statistically just strange seasons in the entire NFL. And we've had teams before that have made the playoffs with negative point differentials. We have multiple in the playoffs this year. They all happen to be in the NFC. Surprise, surprise. But the Vikings, especially, with a minus point differential and a 13-4 record. Like, usually you see a minus point differential, 500 record. Makes sense. All right, they won a couple games where they got blown out and their wins were close. But for the most part, like the Giants, 9-7-1, they're a -6. The Bucks, 8-9-1. They're a sub 500 team. They're a -45. They're the worst point differential team in the entire postseason. But the Vikings being a 13-win team and a minus point differential, we might play in the NFL for 100 years and that might not happen again. So that is a very strange season. And I have a feeling that they will play a very strange game this weekend, and it will be a strange result. I have no idea what the final will be. I haven't really dived into that game this week against the Giants. The line seems fair. The teams played about 4 weeks ago or actually it was sooner than that. It was like 2 weeks ago on Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
And it was a 3-point game. The Vikings needed a 60-yard field goal at the buzzer to win it. My guess is we have a similar vibe this week, but I just, from a betting standpoint, such a strange team on and against this year. And I don't know if it's Kirk Cousins or if it's Kevin O'Connell or if it's just the style that they play, but very, very unique. Probably one of the most unique seasons in NFL history in terms of how many games they won compared to how they looked with their eye test.
Would it surprise you if they won multiple playoff games?
Absolutely, it would. They have to beat the Niners in the second round, so yes, it absolutely would.
Well,
if they beat the Niners in the divisional round, there'll probably be at least a touchdown. I would say a touchdown home underdog in that game, probably maybe 6. That would be my guess. We'll see.
Yeah, just refresh my memory here. As the 3 seed, yeah, I mean, there's no other way that they could face anybody other than San Francisco, I suppose,
No.
if they're in. Just
Unless the
because
Packers, right? If the
the
Pack or no, not
Seahawks,
the Packers.
unless the Seahawks
If the
set the
Seahawks
9, right?
win, yeah, then
Then
Seattle would
they would
face
get the winner of
Philly,
Tampa Bay.
and then it'll be Tampa Bay Dallas. So that's the only way. Unless I mean, but Seattle's a 10-point dog, so that would be
Yeah,
a
from
pretty
that standpoint,
surprising
okay,
upset in itself.
I get it. Yeah, I mean, the fact that they have to go theoretically, if they had to go
A
reface the
10-point
Eagles,
underdog. Let's just leave it at this: a 10-point underdog has never won on Wild Card Weekend. They are 1-7 against the spread and 0-8 straight up. 10-point underdogs or double-digit underdogs.
Interesting.
So that would be an unprecedented thing if Seattle won this weekend.
Okay, well, save the money line bets. All right, my biggest overreaction is the Buffalo Bills. Look, I'll tread carefully here. This has nothing to do with DeMar Hamlin. They didn't play a good game yesterday. They really didn't. And it's not to be expected that they shouldn't have played. They didn't practice this entire week. You know, like they did walkthroughs. That's about it. Half the team was still in Cincinnati until Thursday. Without the addition of 2 kickoff returns for touchdowns, I don't know if they win that game. I thought they got outplayed for most of that game. And New England, you know, you got some turnovers at the end there because clearly they were trailing and they were pressing and they had to score. But, you know, the first 2.5 quarters of that game, Jared, all sort of belonged to the Patriots, especially with given the fact that they spotted them 7 points early and then they had another kickoff return for a touchdown. They just didn't look very crisp. Josh Allen had another red zone turnover in the game, which I think that's their 8th this year, which leads the NFL. So, again, while the story is nice and, you know, prayers and everything for DeMar Hamlin, and I'm glad that he's recovering, obviously, but from a purely football standpoint yesterday, the Buffalo Bills didn't look like a team that was ready to go in the playoffs. Now, thankfully, they're going to go play up the beat up Miami Dolphins. And as you mentioned, they're a double-digit favorite against them. So I'm not sure that they have much to worry about there. But for that particular game, and I know we talk big picture with some of these winners, losers, and overreactions, but it was just yesterday for me with the Buffalo Bills that, in fairness, again, I had the Patriots plus 7.5, so I was quite dismayed or on tilt, as they say, when the opening kickoff went back for a touchdown and knew I was on the wrong side immediately. But c'est la vie, what can you do? All right, we'll move on from the NFL and get into the college football national championship coming up tonight in Southern California between Georgia and TCU. As we do that, we will welcome in our good buddy Bobby Stanley, a.k.a. Prop Holliday, will join us as we look at several different angles for this game. Just some news and notes here on the game. The TCU Horned Frogs 4-0 against the number in their last 4 non-conference games. The under is 4-0 in TCU's last 4 games following an ATS win. Georgia 15-7 against the number in their last 22 neutral site games, and the over for the Bulldogs 4-1 over the last 5 games overall. We are seeing right now, Jared, minus 13 out there, some 12.5 still out there, somewhere floating in those numbers. So that's, and the total sitting at 63.5. So I see some 64s out there. A really high total, all things considered, if you ask me. But Bobby, welcome in. Good to talk to you. Happy Monday. Your thoughts on the national championship game here?
What's going on, guys? Good morning. Happy Monday. I'm more of a
very different look today for college football talk. No hat, I get it.
No, I'm having a good hair day. I woke up with some nice bed head. I'm rolling with that. No, I mean, as far as the national championship, obviously I do a lot more NFL and NBA stuff, but you have to have something for the biggest game of the season. I'd like to trust guys smarter than me, so I listened to a lot of Trent Dilfer. He was on Ryan Russillo's podcast this week, giving some really good information from a coaching standpoint. How, what's the recipe for success for TCU? What are the mismatches? Pretty much what I've taken away from it is Todd Monken is going to want to run the ball. And he wants TCU to load the box with that 3-3-5 defense. And if they get ahead of you with some explosive plays, this game could get ugly early. And I don't see TCU playing from behind very well. So I went with the approach of TCU is going to want them to run the ball 35, 38, 40 times a game so they can somewhat keep it close. But I just think that 3-3-5 defense is going to be very, very susceptible, have trouble with their interior gap assignments, and Georgia just runs all over them. So my prop is related to the running back, Dejon Edwards. You can call it the second running back, but it's almost a 50-50 split between him and McIntosh. Edwards over 49.5 rushing yards.
I'll give you some numbers.
Go ahead, Jared. Go ahead. Sorry, bud.
No. Go ahead, Mark. Go ahead.
The only player prop I have for the game, short and sweet, Max Duggan anytime touchdown plus 125. If they get inside the 10-yard line, the guy's going to take off and run. He's done it all. He scored 2 against Michigan. He scored 1 against K-State in the Big 12 championship game. I mean, when the game is on the line and he's got a chance to score, the guy puts the ball in his hands and he does it. So he's got 8 rushing touchdowns on the year. And if you look at every close game that they've played in this year, you'll see he has at least 1 rushing touchdown.
I would agree with that. I was trying to find, a crazy touchdown prop to bring to the show. There is very, very different odds in college football games for scoring touchdowns. Dugan definitely caught my eye because it was plus odds because he has the propensity to do that in the red zone. But your normally
look at Jamal, 2 touchdowns for him is plus 800 if you really want to get frisky. I
didn't see that till just this morning. That is pretty frisky. Brock Bowers at plus 330 for 2 touchdowns seems interesting. But no, Dugan would be the guy that I target at least for a plus odds. Has he seen a Georgia defense like this before? I mean, they're one of the best run stopping defenses in the nation. I know people want Michigan. I mean, yeah, and he tore that to shreds. No, you're right. I do think this is going to be a blowout. It's too mismatched on paper. I know it's a great story for TCU, but hopefully Dugan can get 1 in should they get in the red zone at some point.
So I know TCU won that game last week. Dugan's numbers weren't that good. He had a 40 passer rating in a clean pocket, and he had a 30% adjusted accuracy rate under pressure. He made some nice plays during the game. The one on 3rd down where he was rolling out and he had the pressure coming in his face in the red zone. Like, that's a really tough play to make. And I give him all the credit in the world because he's got the heart of a champion. But if you look at his down to down numbers in that game, they were not very good. So I don't know what he is going to give us tonight if they are able to get pressure. Now, the one thing about Georgia's defense over the last, especially against Ohio State, they were not able to get pressure. And Nolan Smith has been out for most of the year. Even his backup, Chaz Chambliss, got hurt in the Ohio State game. So in this game tonight, it's going to be a couple of freshmen who are, 5-star kids, and they're probably the best players in their, respective regions or states that they grew up in, but they haven't played in a game this big. We'll see what, their experience factor is for being able to get after it. We know about Jalen Carter in the middle. He's an absolute beast. But for the most part, I think this Georgia front, it's not last year's Georgia front. And I think that's the one thing that maybe TCU can kind of take advantage of that. But if you're Kirby Smart, you just take away Quentin Johnson. You make anyone else beat you, and we'll see what that looks like. On the other side of the ball, I agree with you 100%. But like, to me, running the ball, and when you look at the numbers, TCU bottom 15 nationally in yards per rush before first contact. They don't create a ton of havoc. They don't get into the backfield that much. They gave up a ton of points against Michigan despite pick sixes, fumbles, all the mistakes that Michigan made. I don't see J.J. McCarthy making those same mistakes. And Georgia's offense has been an absolute behemoth in this category. Top 5 yards before first contact, top 15 early down success rate. I know defensively is what we talk about with Georgia, but I think this is going to be a game where their offense is the deciding factor. And it's how TCU can defend, if TCU can defend, how the 3-3-5 is viable against this defense. We'll see. I like your prop a lot. Is there anything else that, you kind of looked at here with maybe Bowers? Bowers is the one guy that I think could be the game wrecker. And his yards prop at 63. I mean, he literally could go off for 40 on the first drive, and then that just flies over. I was thinking about some alts with Bowers. I don't know. Mm-hmm. Maybe we'll play some alts with Edwards too. Anything else frisky that kind of caught your eye there, Bobby?
No, you nailed it with Bowers, and it really is more schematically than anything. You have 3 down linemen, you have 3 linebackers, you have 5 defensive backs. what that's going to struggle with is overload of tight end formations, and Georgia does that so well. They live in 12 personnel. Darnell Washington, I think, is going to be a game time decision. Yes, he's more of a blocking tight end, but if he's in the game, you slide Bowers in the slot. It's mismatch city all over the place against TCU's defense. So another thing I was going to bring up was the alt lines on Edwards. You can get 60 plus yards for plus 142, 70 plus yards for 220. And he's hit those numbers. He's hit those figures throughout the season consistently. I saw a play last week against, it was Michigan. It was the Michigan game. And they lined up with 3 down linemen. I said, all right, this is going to be a small glimpse of what we can expect. McIntosh took off for 55 yards. He only tripped over his own feet, or else he would have scored. I think we're going to see a lot of explosive run plays. The reason I went with Edwards over McIntosh is because McIntosh seems to be a little bit more effective in the pass game. And if they go, they can go 2 running backs, 3 tight ends, and wreak havoc on this defense. So I just went Edwards.
What Washington's status? That's a big one. The tight end, Darnell Washington, I think he's their best run blocker. And that changes how I feel about their running game a little bit if he doesn't play tonight. He left the Ohio State game. I haven't seen yay or nay on him. Everything I've seen has been questionable. So that might be one where I don't bet a running back prop until later tonight when I see his status. But we might not know his status until literally the game kicks off. I mean, they keep these so close to the vest. And then the other one is Kendrick Carter on the other side. He said, I saw the interviews, like he said he's going to play, but who freaking knows with these kids? It's really hard with these injuries. I mean, those are 2 massive injuries for both sides. Washington, the tight end of Georgia, massive in the run blocking schemes. And then obviously the best running back on the team for TCU. Although Mercado's been good. So I thought it was intriguing, Bobby. Tell me your thoughts on this. I thought it was intriguing that Mercado and Miller both had the same touchdown prop odds. And let's be honest, if Miller's healthy, he's the guy. But they're both minus 180 right now, minus 175, somewhere in that range. I thought that was intriguing that the books don't really know how to shade the touchdown prop, because if Miller's healthy, he is massively priced ahead of Mercado, or DeMercado. I don't know how to pronounce his name, but I was surprised when I saw them both priced the same.
We see this a lot in the NFL. It's a way that they hedge themselves to leave themselves, not open so much to exposure. You take the starter, you line them up. Like if Dalvin Cook was a game time decision, Alexander Madison would be the same exact minus 120 to score. It's a way for them to protect themselves until they definitively know.
Got it.
I would imagine 2 touchdown odds, identical. It's the same thing. So
yeah, they're not messing around.
I'll add a couple of notes here, at least from the perspective of Georgia's defense and TCU's offense. Now, you have to go back to the Georgia-Tennessee game to find a time where the Georgia defense was able to really slow down a high-level offense. When they stepped up in class the last 2 times against an offense that was legitimate in LSU and OSU, they gave up 30 and 41 points respectively. I mean, holding Georgia Tech to 14 and Kentucky to 6 doesn't count. Those aren't legitimate offenses. So they haven't really been tested with an offense, that they've been able to slow down since Tennessee. And even in the Florida game, they let Florida back into that game on a good amount. So I think this Georgia defense can be had. Do they have a weakness? Yeah. Outside with their corners. As we saw, look, Neighbors had 100-plus yards for LSU. We saw both Harrison and I forget the other receiver for Ohio State, both had 100 yards in their game. So Johnson can get over 100 yards in this game. But the problem for Georgia right now that I think defensively what they're looking at, it's the first time all year long they're going to be staring in the mirror at a quarterback that does exactly what Stetson Bennett does on the other side of the football. And I'm not sure that they're ready to stop that as much as they may think that they are. Look, statistically, you give the edge to Stetson Bennett in completion percentage and passing yards, but you give the edge to Duggan in passing TDs and rushing yards. But, this is a guy who's going to keep plays alive with his legs and be able to throw the ball fairly accurately to his receivers. So I'm curious to see how Georgia responds. I won't eliminate the idea that they could put together a game plan that if they get up by 2 scores, the Kirby Smart death march will choke out TCU's offense the same way it did against Tennessee. You'll see 10-play drives for 6 minutes, 12-play drives for 7 minutes, and they'll just eat up all the clock in the world and never give TCU a chance to score in this game. So I don't eliminate the fact that absolutely could happen. TCU's game script is they have to do exactly what they did against Michigan, play with a lead. If they can get out early, and don't be surprised to see Sonny Dykes win the coin toss and take the ball again, just like he did against Michigan, and go down the field and try to score early. Because he knows that if he gives the ball away and they score, his team is already behind the 8 ball. So I think there's a big, that's a big way this game is going to unfold. I acknowledge that Michigan probably outcoached themselves out of winning that game. I think that's totally fair to say. That had Jim Harbaugh and his offensive staff not been a bunch of putzes, that game probably turns out a whole lot differently, because asking J.J. McCarthy to throw yourself back into a game is a terrible game plan for Michigan, and it didn't work out. So, to me, guys, the total is very telling. And I get that the public has moved this thing up to 63.5, but the fact that it was the same total as Ohio State, at least to me, tells me that odds makers believe TCU can score to a certain extent and get close to 30, if not above 30 in this game. Right? Like, unless you're telling me 42-20 is the outcome in favor of Georgia, Georgia gets to 40 routinely, so I guess it's fair. But I was just curious your thoughts, guys, on the total.
Go ahead. I agree. I mean, from what I've seen, you're not gonna march the ball consistently on Georgia. They're gonna have to steal yards through the passing game. We're gonna have to see some misdirection. We're gonna have to see some reverses. I don't think they're going to be able to establish any type of run against Georgia. So follow the OSU game script. Throw as much as you can. I completely agree with your take, Mark. If you get the coin flip, you take the ball and you don't look back. You're not playing from behind in this game. As far as the total,
yeah, I agree with that.
It's a national championship game, and you know what the public's going to do to anything related to an over. Maybe line it back down to the normal 60 mark. But no, there's no reason that TCU can't put up 3 touchdowns. It's just, is it going to be enough? Probably not.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you the splits. I wouldn't base any bets on this solely, but it might give you a hint on where the market might move over the next, 12 hours or so. TCU's obviously very public dog, and the over, obviously. I mean, it's not rocket science here. Like, it just, public's going to see that big number, and they're going to see what the final score was of the Michigan game, and they're going to be like, oh wow, I'm going to feel really comfortable taking the full 13 tonight. And then the over is going to be just a massive public bet. I think the over will probably end up being the more public of the two plays, just because of where the number is and what Georgia put up. And, they all you have to do is look at the box scores from last Saturday, and you see the final scores, and all 4 teams scored north of 40. And it's going to be a pretty easy decision for, the unsophisticated bettor tonight. Does that mean the TCU and the over can't hit? Of course not. Once the game starts, anything can happen. But yeah, I think let's just leave it at this. I wouldn't bet the under tonight. I would not bet the under tonight, because betting an under in college football is torturous. I could make it. I can make more of a case for TCU than I can for the over, because I think the over is one of those bets that you're going to be really, really nervous for most of the game, that you're going to be up against it. Where I think the back door at some point for TCU will be open. Whether or not they can kick through it, we'll see. The over, I think you're going to be chasing it most of the game, because let's be honest, these two teams don't care what the final score is. They just want to win.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's also a correlation. I don't think TCU can win an under game.
Dog and over. Yeah.
Georgia can win an under game. But, the only way TCU wins this game outright is if it's a shootout. I just, they have to press Georgia defensively a lot to be able to win this game outright. And I don't think they will. I'm with you, Jared. I would probably side on TCU plus the points. You put a gun to my head. But, again, it's not out of the realm of possibility that Georgia can win this thing 37-13 and just be done, and the thing stays under the total as well.
Yeah. Bobby, who wins tonight, bud? What's your final score prediction?
Final score prediction. I actually do think Georgia covers. Let's go with 42-14 Georgia. I think it's a murder.
Oh, that gets
you right.
Really, really aggressive.
I do not think this game is competitive. I think I'm going to bet at halftime, and hopefully Dejan Edwards has it at half. My over, and I'm playing his alt line as well, probably up to 70.
Well, that's a great game script for you. I would imagine with Dejan Edwards being the running back prop that you want a Georgia lead. A big Georgia lead is good. You don't want them to be behind.
I think we saw the best of TCU last week. I do think this one is a blowout. But hey, I'm not the college football guy. What do I know?
All right, Bobby Stanley. Follow him on Twitter at Prop Holliday. That's 2 L's, HOLLIDAY. Appreciate the time as always, bud. Thank you, and enjoy the game tonight.
Later, guys. Best of luck.
Have a good one, Baba.
Right,
Great job yesterday, too.
Javon Edwards over 49.5 is Bobby's
I
play
like it.
for the game at the National Championship. Yeah,
I like
interesting
it.
angle to say the least. All right, Jared, we have a Super Wild Card weekend set. As we look at the lines in the AFC and the NFC here, just some early look aheads. Jaguars, Chargers. Chargers open as a 2.5-point favorite, now bet down to 1.5 already. Again, which is interesting because there are a lot of interesting opening lines for Wild Card weekend. Let's just say that much. But I'm not even seeing ones across the board right now. So I think the Jaguars are Trevor Lawrence has attracted them a little bit more to the public, I think, than what we would have normally thought. However, we are seeing some sort of reverse line movement here early on. No, we're not. I'm sorry. I'm looking at the wrong column. Well, I'm looking here. I see 70% of the tickets on the Chargers, yet the line is going down. So there is a little bit of reverse line movement going on. But your reaction to that?
Yeah, I think it's too soon to call anything. Like, the market's so unsettled right now. Like, the lines just dropped last night. So we'll see where it trends. Like, it could just be one or two sharp groups offshore that just wanted to take a bite of two. I didn't see 2.5. I don't know who was dealing 2.5. I did see offshore.
Last night, FanDuel had it opened at 2.5.
That's a terrible number. Yeah, they definitely they opened up a wrong number, because I'm seeing offshore it opened to pick them at certain shops, and then it was actually bet up towards the Chargers. And Chris being kind of the shop that's the big offshore shop that the big sharp groups will bet into, especially early on in the market. It opened to pick them last night at 8:57 p.m. My time, so about 10 o'clock local, Eastern time. Or excuse me, 11 o'clock-ish Eastern time. And then it got bet up towards the Chargers and then bet back down to a pick 'em today. So, again, when you're at 1.5, the difference between those numbers are not very important. They're not impactful. I don't want to look into the movement there. If it gets to 3 on the Chargers side, then we can start to raise our eyebrows and say, okay, well, when's the Jaguars money going to come back? In terms of the game handicap, obviously, our buddy Brandon Staley's got some splaining to do, huh? I mean, you probably watched that yesterday and had your hand on your chin, like, what the hell is Brandon doing? Herbert's playing into the third quarter. Keenan Allen was on the field in the fourth quarter, and Mike Williams and Joey Bosa got hurt. I mean, I don't even know what to even make of that. And if those two guys missed the game this week, that is just terrible coaching on Staley's part. I do like the Jaguars a little bit. I think it's and I know it's a take we'll hear a lot this week. Oh, the Chargers are going to charge her, right? But, I mean, listen, that's a real thing. I mean, you saw it unfold yesterday in a game that meant nothing. The Chargers managed to charge her in a game that didn't even mean anything. And I think Jacksonville kind of played their worst game of the year almost last week, and they still managed to win. I mean, how many times did they have an opportunity to take the reins of that game, and they
they should have covered
kind of bumbled their way through it?
I mean, I want to give some credit to Tennessee's defense and Vrabel, because he's 100%. Always good in those spots. But, yeah, I mean, they kicked 2 field goals inside the 5-yard line.
I don't think Staley is Vrabel. Right? Like, I don't know if he's going to have his boys. So I would kind of lean Jacksonville. I think if you get 2 or 2.5, I think that's a good number. And let's just leave it at this. This is a very good, and the teasers, I'll do the numbers and I'll put it out in the column this week. The wild card playoff teasers have been very profitable. There have been years where it didn't matter which side you teased, you won. So right the teasers, obviously, with this game being at 1.5 through 3 and 7, I think that is an ideal teaser leg for Jacksonville. And that might be how I play it once we get to the end of the rainbow here.
All right. Dolphins and Bills opened up at 10 last night. There were 10.5s out there before midnight, and now we're sitting at 11, which, again, I think is to be expected. There's still some conjecture who's playing quarterback for Miami. And look, if Tua gets ruled out, this number goes to 2 touchdowns is my guess. And whether it's Skylar Thompson or Teddy Bridgewater, I don't think it matters. If you're on Buffalo, you better get on this thing now before it starts to move. Is 11 versus I suppose you could argue 11 is better than 11 and a half or 12. I mean, we do see games end on 11 at times, more commonly than 12 or sometimes even 13. But, how much do you believe Buffalo is going to be able to separate? Because, Jared, I don't know that they really have. I genuinely don't. I mean, again, yesterday was an interesting game. And I give them a little bit of a pass from the standpoint of, getting out to playing. But they didn't win that game by 12 points on their own. They didn't play well enough to win that game by 2 scores.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't seen 2 kickoff returns in one game since Leon Washington did it a million years ago for the Seahawks. It's not something that happens very often, but it happened, and it happened, and you just have to move on from it. I think the Armstead injury matters a lot to me here. The Bills' pass rush has been a little bit muted over the last few weeks since Von Miller's injury. They've been defensively, I think it's fair to say they are not a top 5 defense, or not playing like a top 5 defense right now. Their numbers still indicate that they are, but I don't know that they're creating the amount of pressure needed to say that they are a top 5 defense. For example, this past week against Mac Jones and the Patriots, they finished 19th in the efficiency ratings on defense. Like that, at home with, a seeding on the line, like you've got to play better against the Patriots offense, which is not, I think the Dolphins offense, if Tua is in, obviously, much more explosive, much more dangerous than what the Patriots are going to throw out there. Now, you saw Mostert get banged up yesterday. You saw Tyreek Hill get banged up yesterday. And obviously, Tua is still in concussion protocol. I would be willing to bet he does not play. And I think that's why the line is starting to creep towards Buffalo, because the Bills were, I think it was right, they were a 7-point favorite at home that Saturday night against Miami with Tua full strength. So if it is Skylar Thompson or Teddy, I would imagine it definitely gets close to 14, but I think that's maybe 13 is where we see it stop, because I've seen about a 5-point move from Tua to Teddy. That's kind of where the market was dealing when that injury first happened a couple weeks ago. Remember the Patriots, the Dolphins were like a 2-point favorite, and then it went to 3 on the other side. So it was about a 5-point move. So if you say Dolphins -7 a few weeks ago when everyone was healthy, maybe it's 12 or 13 now if they do announce Tua out. If Tua's in, it probably goes back to around 7.5 or 7-ish, I would say. So it's probably half-baked right now, but we're starting to see a little bit of that movement towards Buffalo, which tells me that the Tua injury, I think, the concussion protocol is pretty serious. He was still in concussion protocol as of yesterday. The double-digit underdogs have not done well in this weekend historically. They have never won, and they've only covered once in the last 20 years, and that was Taylor Heineke having the game of his life, and the Bucs still almost covered that game. They won by 8, and it was a 10-point spread. So I don't see a path to Miami covering here, but if 2 is in and, the line sinks beneath 10, then you can maybe start to talk.
All right, one more in the AFC, Ravens and Bengals. This one opened at 5.5. I saw some 6.5s pop up early on. I think we're settling in now at 6.5, Jared, as the Bengals, at home again in a repeat of a matchup we just saw. I still think it's curious to me why John Harbaugh laid this thing down yesterday. Who am I to doubt John Harbaugh? He's one of the smartest coaches in the league, but it was just an interesting thing. I mean, obviously they put nothing on tape yesterday for the Bengals to review. Maybe the Bengals did put things on tape for the Ravens to review. I guess there's some strategic and, sort of game planning going on here. But, Lamar Jackson coming back after not playing in 6 weeks presents a hard handicap for a lot of teams. Remember, before Lamar Jackson went down with this injury, it's not exactly like the Ravens setting the world on fire. They had struggled to a certain.
I agree.
They only scored. Let's just go back here and let me look at it. They only scored 13 points against the Panthers. Against the Saints, and I think there was a turnover. Or that was the Buccaneers game. There was a turnover where they scored 7. But regardless, I just didn't see a lot of firepower from this offense. Is Lamar capable of turning a game on its side? Absolutely. But how do you handicap this one?
I don't think I can right now, frankly. I think unlike the Buffalo game, where we have seen some movement towards Buffalo over the last, 12 hours or so, up to 11 now at most shops, we haven't seen any movement here off the 6.5 really. And I think that's because the sharps, the sophisticated money, just we really let's just leave it at this. I think there's more certainty in the market that Tua won't play this week. Whereas I don't think there's a lot of certainty in the market about Lamar Jackson. That injury is, lower body. We don't know if he's 100%. He's been practicing. And then you also have the Tyler Huntley wrinkle. He didn't play yesterday either. And his shoulder's been banged up for the last couple weeks. So I think because of all that uncertainty, we're going to see a lot of wait and see with the line movement and the smart money entering the market. And once the smart money enters the market, that's when things start to tilt, especially when we're hovering around that key number of 7, which is kind of where we're sitting now. So I guess long story short, this is a game that I think is very, very difficult to bet now. Thankfully, it's not being played until Sunday, so we have plenty of time. But I wouldn't bet this game. I probably wouldn't even handicap this game, frankly, until I really get some concrete information about what the quarterback situation is for Baltimore. We might not know that until Friday. Like, we might be sitting here with our hands, under our butt until Friday, Saturday, and we might not know who's playing quarterback for the Ravens. I think the Miami-Buffalo situation is a little clearer to me. I don't think Tua is going to play. He's had like 3 concussions this year. I don't think it's smart for him to play. I have no idea what the Ravens are going to do. And you're right. Maybe it was Harbaugh just kind of doing the old 3-card monte yesterday saying, you don't know what we're going to do. We're going to start Anthony Brown. Huntley's in. We don't know, because they're going to – he knew, hey, we're going to run it back next week, and now you're still going to be guessing. I don't know. Zach Taylor in a playoff game, they had a great run last year. I love this Bengals team. I really hope they make another run this year. I think Bengals-Bills would be an unbelievable divisional round game based off of everything we've seen over the last couple of weeks. But I don't know what to make of this Ravens team right now. And I think it's because of the quarterback situation. We're going to be in a holding pattern with this line all week long.
I would add one more thing. Because the Ravens played at 1 and the Chargers played at 4, right? The Ravens could have gone all out to win the game, and still it could have been for naught. Look, the idea that the NFL gifted them the coin flip thing is part of the reason why I was a little bit perplexed. Like, why not? I guess he figured I could win this thing, right? Lose the coin flip, still end up going to Cincinnati, and even if the Chargers win, I'd still end up going to Cincinnati. So, bottom line is that there was more in favor of him, I guess, laying it down. And he might, if I asked you who has the edge coaching staff wise with 2 weeks to prepare for the same opponent, the Ravens or the Bengals, I think I give the edge to the Ravens in that category.
I would agree. I mean, if you just want to talk straight line analysis, I think the number closed 11 yesterday, right? 10, 11 yes. With Baltimore, Cincinnati.
11 so, and a half, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, that tells you that tells you everything you need to know about this line. Like, these teams just played 24 hours ago, and the line was 11, and now it's 6.5. They have no idea who's playing quarterback for Baltimore. They are half-baking. They are guessing it's going to be Lamar Jackson, but they don't really know. If they knew, I think this line would probably be much closer to 4, 5. But the fact that it's hovering around 7 and it hasn't moved an inch tells me that nobody really knows who's playing quarterback for the Ravens. And maybe that was Harbaugh's plan all along. He was going to muck the game up yesterday as much as possible and make it so hard for you to plan or predict or game scheme for what we're going to see next week. And I think he did a good job of that because the Ravens looked freaking awful yesterday.
Yeah. 2 games in the NFC that are both sitting at the same line. Giants at Vikings, Minnesota laying 3, Cowboys at Bucks, and the Cowboys laying 3. Now, the Cowboys are down to 2.5 because I would assume it's smart money that has come in on Tom Brady at home catching points. Tom Brady, in his career as an underdog, covers the spread 70% of the time. In the playoffs, it's even higher. So I would lean on Brady here. And that 2.5, by the way, is obviously going to be juiced. I think it's juiced across the board. I'm seeing minus 120s, minus 118s, so minus 115s, but you're not getting that 2.5 at a straight minus 110. No movement on the Giants-Vikings line here. It's still sitting at 3 across the board. I'm very curious to watch that line throughout the rest of this week and see the minute it tilts on one side or the other, how everybody reacts.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because if you look at the openers, for the most part, all of the games are sitting around key numbers, either side or total. And it makes sense if you consider a lot of the quarterback injuries in some of the games, but the totals even like you got two totals, Miami, Buffalo, and Baltimore, Cincy, right at 44. That's a key total, most landed on total. 47, secondary key. It's the third most landed on total. So you can kind of see where the sports books are leaning here. They kind of magnet towards those key numbers, and then they let the market tell you which is the right side, over or under, dog or favorite, and then they will juice accordingly off the three. They will juice accordingly off the totals. Usually they'll tick up the totals a little bit. Like we've already seen Buffalo go down a little bit, probably because they don't think Tua is going to play. We've already seen Cincinnati and Baltimore go down a little bit off the 44. That's because they're unsure what the quarterback situation is there. With this Vikings-Giants game, very little movement. Very, very little. We did see offshore it open 2.5 and get bought up to 3, but it looks like 3 is kind of the consensus number right now, and I think that's a very fair number. Again, these teams just played 2 or 3 weeks ago, and the game landed 3. I think for Dallas and Tampa Bay, if I had to guess, and I did write this up for Early Birds. It's posted now. I didn't give any picks in Early Birds. I'm not ready to pick these games yet, but I just kind of gave you my market analysis and where I think these lines might move. I think Tampa Bay is going to be a very trendy dog this week too, because everybody saw what Dallas did yesterday, and they're not going to be very keen on betting the Cowboys. So my guess is we do close south of 3, and I think Dallas will be kind of a contrarian favorite. But here's the trend for you. You tell me if this trend matters or not. Some trends matter, some trends don't. Home underdogs have not fared well this round. How about this? 8-2 against the spread. That's okay. 5-13 straight up, 6 straight losses overall. We haven't had an outright home underdog winner since the Colts erased that absurd deficit against the Chiefs back in 2014. They were down like 3 scores, and it was Andrew Luck, and he was throwing it all over the field. That was the last time we had a home underdog win on Wild Card Weekend. So Tampa Bay's fighting a little bit of history here.
I will add this much, Jared, at least where I'm seeing here. Between the Giants and Minnesota, you have a sharp discrepancy between the ticket count and the money. 57% of the tickets are on the Giants, but 95% of the money right now sits on the Giants.
Yeah.
So
it's
always
early,
something to watch.
It's tough to gauge those counts. It's tough.
But those are the
we'll see what happens
much like
when
on
things
election
settle
night.
this week.
These are the early returns, right? I mean, this is where we are.
Yeah.
We've got a whole week.
5% of the precinct is reporting. The limits are very low. A lot of times you'll get the sharp money at this stage will just grab numbers, and then they'll literally they won't even think about it. It will just be that number's not what my number is. I'm going to grab it. I'll move it by a half a point, and I'll have the CLV in my back pocket, and I'll figure out what I want to do with it over the weekend. There's not a lot of deep thought and analysis that goes into the early betting stage. It's a lot of number grabbing. So I try not to look too much into that at this point. I want to know where the line is. Let's just leave it at this. If the Vikings line is still at 3 on Friday, then I'll know that, okay, there's not a lot of decisiveness in this market. If the Cowboys-Bucks line stays at 3 or maybe 2.75, then I'll know that there's not a lot of decisiveness in this market. But at this stage, it's very hard to glean what the quote-unquote sharp side is, because we haven't seen the market really mature yet.
All right, real quick. Seahawks and Niners. Niners laying 10 seems to be now across the board. Not seeing anything else. It opened at 9.5. I'm seeing a couple of shops. Circa had it at 9.5. DraftKings had it at 9.5. So now we're settling in at 10 here.
Yeah. So I'll be honest. I think if I was gonna, and I did this last night. I wrote this down. I just wrote who I think is gonna win all 6 games. I wrote Niners, Jags, Bills, Vikes, Bengals, Bucks. And this was just like the first thing that popped into my head. I do this with the NCAA tournament sometimes too, with the first round of the bracket. Literally, don't even think, numbers don't matter, nothing, just who you think's going to win. And then I really started to look at the bracket for the Niners. If they face the Vikings, if they go from the Seahawks to the Vikings, and then there's a chance they might even be favored in the NFC Championship game on the road against Philly, depending on what Philly looks like over the next couple games. And then we'll see if they can even win, because let's be honest, the Eagles haven't exactly looked great. Man, the Niners right now at I think 6-1 to win the Super Bowl is a bet I would absolutely consider making. The bracket shapes up really nice for them. They will absolutely be favored on the road against the Vikings, maybe by a field goal or more. And you could probably make a case, maybe Philly is favored, but it won't be more than 1 or 2. Like, they won't be a 3-point favorite at home against San Francisco. That game will be a very tight line. So you're telling me that the Niners are going to be a 10-point favorite this weekend. No one's ever won on Wild Card Weekend as an underdog of 10 or more. Then they're going to be a favorite again in the second round, and then they might even be a favorite in the NFC Championship game. I think 6-1 is a very fair price for them to win the Super Bowl at this stage of the game. So I think that might be the only bet I make this weekend revolving around this game, is just the Niners either to win the NFC or to win the Super Bowl. We'll see what numbers we get. But San Francisco looks like the real deal, man. Brock Purdy's numbers are better than Garoppolo's. I know it's only 5 weeks, and, I don't need to say much about that defense that hasn't already been said.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was looking at that last night. Who would be the every year once the playoffs start, I try to find a team that I would just take a flyer on to win the Super Bowl, and usually 7-1 is my sort of benchmark. I've got to be there or higher with the numbers for it to really end up paying off. We're in a situation where I can hedge, right? Like, the idea is that I'm hoping at best the team gets there, and then I can hedge the bet and guarantee myself some money. More often than not, that's typically what I do, just because I'm looking to take money out of the whole thing, not necessarily be right, if that makes sense. So we'll see. Yeah. I'm with you. We'll make a decision before the game's.
I mean, let's just leave it at this. They are 2-1 to win the NFC. They might be favored in all 3 games. And if they're favored in the final game and you have a 2-1 in your back pocket in the NFC Championship game, bet the Eagles as an underdog. If that is the case, I don't know it'll be them, but I think there is value in the futures market with San Francisco this week, which is very surprising to say at this stage, but it's rare that we see a number 2 seed that I think is better than the 1. That doesn't happen too often.
Right. Want to remind you guys, Let's Bet It is presented by Superbook Sports. Go to superbook.com, download the app today, and this season we're all rooting for safeties. We got one yesterday. That's because Superbook could give you a $50 bonus for each safety scored this season. Just place a $100 pregame bet on any spread or total. And if there's a safety scored in any game on Sunday, you get a $50 bonus. Visit superbook.com for terms and conditions. So yesterday, if you bet with Superbook, $100 bet, because of that crap that ended at the end of the Jets-Dolphins game, you got a $50 bonus. So there is that.
A lot of money changed hands on that play.
God, dude, the poor bastard.
A lot of money changed hands on that play.
I said this last night. I said, look, if you haven't had a bad beat like that, you haven't been doing this long enough. That's generally just what it boils down to.
Yes.
So
that's very true.
That's it. Pickswise.com. Jared, I know you talked a little bit about your columns that are up there, which everybody needs to make sure they go check out. What is on there as far as 3-star plays for today?
Yeah, I mean, you've got TCU, and we'll butt heads on that one in a minute. Kings and Magic. Philip Tomich has a bet tonight on a side in that game. That's a late game, but the Kings have been playing well. Lauren gave us a scouting report when she was in Sacramento the other night with the Hawks. I mean, Kings playing good ball right now. Philip seems to think so as well. And then Ricky Diamond's got a tennis play. We've got I don't know if you're a big tennis guy, but Aussie Open's coming up real soon. One of the best things about the new year is we get the Aussie Open, and it's a very late night on the East Coast, not as late on the Pacific time zone. So I might be getting involved with the Aussie Open, those late 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock Pacific time when no one's up, no one's doing anything. And Ricky does a great job capping tennis. So we'll have a guide to guide us through a very difficult tennis card there. But yeah, he's got something for the Adelaide International, which of course is, I don't know if it's in New Zealand or Australia. It's somewhere out there. But they are starting up the tennis season, and Ricky's got you covered for that tournament.
All right, Jared, let's get to our plays of the day. Go ahead, get us started.
Yeah, so I will give you the full week spiel here of how I kind of handled it. So when the number dropped, it was Saturday night. I bet Georgia laying 13.5. I thought it would get up to 14. I honestly did. The early money came in on TCU. It drove the line down to 12.5. And I think it was both public and sharp money from what I was hearing. And in my mind, I was like, man, maybe I should take another bite at Georgia here at 12.5. I think the number's going to get back to 13. It did. I don't know if it's going to get higher than that. I think 13 is kind of the consensus. My guess is we close right around there because the limits have been relatively open. We started to see yesterday, 24 hours before, I noticed a little bit of Georgia steam. It got back up to 13.5 offshore, and then it got bought back down. So again, I think 13 is kind of the number here. So it's really, who you think is going to, be the right side. And I don't love it. It's really not a bet that I would, beat my chest about, like, oh yeah, Georgia, I think is going to blow them out. Like I think TCU's had a really nice season, and I don't know if they are going to be ready for the onslaught offensively in this game that Georgia will provide. And we talk a lot about Georgia's defense, very well deserved. But I really think this is an offensive team. And I think they're the best offensive team in the country because of how versatile they are. They can beat you with the run, and they obviously can beat you in the air. Stetson Bennett's been fantastic. And if Georgia falls behind at any point in this game and you get a decent price on the money line, that's where I would really look to pounce in terms of a live betting spot. But if we get this game played out 100 times, I think more often than not, Georgia is on the front foot and TCU just doesn't quite have the horses to keep up here. So I'll keep it at 13.5. We'll grade it at 13 because it looks like that's the consensus number. But again, it's not like a best play, oh my God, 3-star kind of vibe. I think I just think Georgia's the better team, and I think they're going to show it to you tonight.
Well, we'll go head to head for my best bet play of the day. I'll take the 13.5 with TCU as I put it up on the Pickswise.com website. Again, the bottom line here for me, as Georgia, has the ability to dominate. Like I said all show long, it's not out of the realm of possibility that I think that Georgia could put together a game script where they cover this number and absolutely defensively dominate. But I've just seen enough of TCU this year hang around and beat opponents and be better than people expected. And for them to do it one more time against the big boys, the chip is on their shoulder. Nobody thinks they can win this thing. Sonny Dykes and company have proven time and time again that they belong in the conversation for this season with the best teams in college football. The game script is TCU has to play with a lead. I expect them to take the ball if they win the toss and go right down the field and try to put points up and get Georgia a little bit on the defensive. If they can limit Stetson Bennett a little bit. Stetson Bennett was not great for 3 quarters against Ohio State. If you get that same Stetson Bennett, obviously TCU is going to be in this game. I lean on the fact that it's probably closer to a shootout than it is to a defensive battle, given the way these teams play. But all that boils down to TCU being able to stop the run. And if they can do that, they're going to keep themselves in this game, Jared. Feels like too many points for me. Again, I believe Georgia wins this game. I'll just take the 13.5 for TCU to cover this number. That'll do it for us here on this Monday on Let's Bet It. Again, make sure you guys download the Pickswise app. It's available on the Apple Store and Google Play. Subscribe to the Pickswise YouTube channel. Give a thumbs up and a like to the content there as well. We appreciate you guys joining us. For Jared Smith, I'm Mark Zinno. We'll be back tomorrow with another edition of Let's Bet It to recap it all. Have a wonderful Monday. Enjoy the national championship. Go get it. Go bet it. We'll talk to you tomorrow.